Hello, hello. Welcome to Bike Here, where I'm helping you bike more and worry less with the hopes that you'll be able to leave your car at home. I'm your host, Arlie Greenwald, and this video and podcast series is sponsored by Turn Bicycles. Turn is my employer where I'm the product marketing manager here in North America. And I'm so excited to relaunch this podcast into your ears and into this video series as I talk to some great people doing amazing things to help you bike more and worry less. Today's guest is Noah from People for Bikes, and this is an important episode. We're going to be talking about the new EBIKE Act, which is a piece of legislation People for Bikes is pushing to get a tax credit of up to $1,500 or 30% of an e-bike. So please listen closely. And if you're watching or need to reference some links, look at the show notes where I'm going to link to the specific forms and links that Noah talks about in this video. So before I keep going, let's get Noah on the line and learn about the EBIKE Act. Welcome, Noah. Thank you for joining us. And I'm so excited. People for Bikes sent out the email blast last week about this EBIKE Act. So thank you for all of your work and joining us to talk about this e-bike initiative that I guess you're behind.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on to chat. It's one of those things I can't get tired talking about. So it's exciting, it's new, and it could be really, really meaningful, I think.
So before we dig into the e-bike specifics, Noah, tell me, you work for People for Bikes, which is one of, it is the powerhouse in the bike industry for advocacy and policy. So can you tell me what you do with People for Bikes here in the US?
My title is Federal Affairs Manager, and I'm based in Washington, D.C. We're a trade association representing nearly 300 brands across the U.S. and the globe. We have a foundation as well, and so we really focus on everything having to do with the bike and bike riding, bike infrastructure, bike policy, bike business. And it's an exciting time to be in this world, in this field, because more and more people, I think, are waking up and realizing the power of the bike to meet their needs and to just get where they need to go and to get that sweat, to stay safe. And they're realizing what they need from their communities to do that too. And so it's an exciting time to be working in policy at any level, but my perspectives from the federal level in how do we increase funding to cities and states so they can use it to build better active transportation infrastructure and actually connect networks to give people a meaningful transportation alternative, or to get them to trails to recreate too. It's just as important. And if we've learned a lot of things the past 8 months, but having safe access to recreation is really vital. So I am in DC, like I said, and working to, do everything we can in the federal policy space to make bike riding safer, more accessible, more affordable, to support, the businesses of our membership and to support the bike rider at every level in every community.
That's amazing. And from my standpoint, as a brand, as well, I was a bike shop owner and a consumer, like I don't think enough people in the consumer side realize how much lobbying really impacts our day-to-day life. It's a dirty secret, but I used to work in automotive marketing and the lobbying and healthcare and things like that. But the amount of effort you specifically have to do, and then Alex also on your team and others, just to move the needle slightly, and that's something that I think we need to talk about more, because it's so easy to get, I don't want to say down or frustrated, but it's a lot of work and it's an ongoing ball that you guys are pushing up a hill. So thank you for your work and People for Bikes. And Today, we're going to be talking about the EBIKE Act, which whoever came up with the acronym for e-bike is brilliant. So tell us, this came out last week. We're recording this the middle of February right now. Tell us about this EBIKE Act, and then we'll get into how people can get involved.
Yeah. So the acronym or the backronym is a common theme in DC, and Hill staff, legislators just love to make acronyms for their bills. So for the listeners' awareness, EBIKE in this case stands for the Electric Bicycle Incentive Kickstart for the Environment Act. And if you want to Google it, it's now HR 1019. And I think the bill text should be online soon and on congress.gov. But yeah, that's just the name of it. But what the bill does is something we've been working on for a long time, inspired by programs happening at the state and local levels, very inspired by what's happening in Europe and what we've been seeing there for not just the past year, but the past 5-10 years to incentivize, subsidize, and promote bicycles as a form of transportation, a meaningful, accessible one. So what this bill would do is offer a refundable consumer tax credit of up to 30%, or it would be 30% of the cost of an electric bicycle for electric bicycles that cost less than $8,000. You would be eligible once every 3 years or twice for a joint return for a couple. And that's pretty much the basics. The electric bicycles that would be eligible for the credit, besides being less than $8,000, would have to fall within the 3-class definition that has now passed in more than a majority of states. And we're really hoping to find new ways to include it at the federal level. And the maximum credit that you could get is $1,500 based off of the current version of the bill. So that could be $1,500 off your next electric cargo bicycle. And, there's a lot of reasons why this is something People for Bikes was really eager to support when Congressman Panetta's office first reached out to just do some research and look into it and understand more about the e-bike market and ridership trends. And because we've been looking and supporting programs like in California, now in Colorado, and a lot of really hyper-local ones too, we had some research to show the success of different subsidies and incentive programs in some North American places and a lot of European places. And that research really informed how they were able to structure the bill the way that it is now. When we think about incentives, there's a lot of questions we've been getting before this happened. Just why isn't there a subsidy for electric bicycles? I think a lot of people who are just either starting to dip their toes into the electric bicycle or e-cargo bike space is just like, wait, this can do this much for me, much like a car can, and I'm not getting anything back for it like I might for an electric vehicle or even an electric motorcycle in some instances. And so that was sort of the central question is let's get something on the books that does that. And it's electric bicycles specifically because of the power that they have to really displace carbon emissions, to really offer consumers something that works for them, ideally somewhat like a car. Transportation sector makes up about a third of carbon emissions in the United States, and the majority of that is from passenger vehicles. So goals that are being made to increase the use of electric vehicles are great. It's great to see a bunch of auto companies committing to that, but at the end of the day, that isn't necessarily going to solve congestion, and it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be expensive. And so we're really proud to be able to promote the electric bicycle as one part of a much broader solution to lower carbon emissions, mitigate the worst effects of climate change, increase options for mobility for more Americans, and use your riding as a tool to demand better infrastructure too.
Wow. So if you're listening or watching this and some of the e-bike terms Noah just talked about is, maybe they're a little bit over your head, I'll link to an EBike Basics article and podcast we've done in the past. And then Noah mentioned something about classifications, and this is something People for Bikes has been working on for about 4 years, I think. Alex has been fighting
Maybe
that good fight.
even, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So 5 years. And that's just how you classify different bikes depending on their speed that they can assist you or if they have a throttle or not. And I'll link to People for Bikes. They have a great map so you can figure out the legislation, not only in your state, but sometimes it's even county and city specific. So we'll link to that. But something that Noah was talking about, and that's just not only the feel good aspect of e-bikes, but it can truly replace most families' second car, especially now where a lot of us are working from home. I'm in my basement, you're in your apartment. And the other thing that we've learned either in the cycling industry or the mobility industry is so many of our trips are less than 3 miles. And an e-bike just makes that possible in whatever you're wearing, if you have your kids, groceries. And really, my tagline, Noah, is leave the car at home, where we don't have to replace everybody's car, but if we replace a lot of those trips to a
Mhm.
more enjoyable bike ride, it helps health, environment, so many things. And you'll find as you start e-bike shopping, the good ones that are going to be long-term investments are more than $1,500. So that's where this credit really comes in play, where if you're trying to replace a car, you're probably looking between $3,000 and $5,000 for a good e-bike that's going to last and that can potentially carry your family or, Costco run. So that's where this either up to 30% or $1,500 is so important for me, because it's just going to be that little nudge to the person that was thinking about it but just couldn't justify it, or they went with a lesser product because they had to, and maybe in a year it just isn't satisfactory and isn't working for their needs. um, where do you think, as a maybe a bike industry, or this is a very consumer focused um, project, where do you think our best wins could be getting this messaging and marketing out?
I think it's such a great question. I mean, obviously, most of the industry is really excited and they've been reaching out to their members, but it's the same thing for potential e-bike consumers or just individual constituents. It's a tired saying, but you call your representatives and you ask them to co-sponsor this bill. The more names, the more endorsements of members of Congress that are added to this bill as it stands now, the more likelihood that it will have to get it attached to a larger vehicle, something like an infrastructure policy package that we see this administration really talking about prioritizing. That's one of the potential avenues that we could take, or a green tax package is also something up for discussion, but that can only happen if leadership in Congress sees that their members are co-sponsoring or supporting or talking about this bill. And they're only going to do that if they hear from their constituents that this is something they really want to see signed into law. And I'll add that email that we sent out last week. We'll have more. We'll have way more opportunities going to our email lists for folks to send a letter to their representative through our portal showing your support for the EBIKE Act.
Yeah, there's this great, just quick form that I'll link to that just list off where you live, and it sends it off, I guess, to the right person based
Yep.
off the zip code. Great
Yep.
work. From my standpoint, I'm trying to look at, like, how do I partner with core dealers or core local advocacy groups to, like, how do we put ad buys behind this? Just because, to me, the, this is our first, it feels like our first opportunity with the new administration, with Mayor Pete taking the reins. Like, how can we show them that we're an important force in this conversation? And I've sent it to every family member that I can think of. Like, just all they're doing is putting their name down, and
Mhm.
it's not like you're asking for money or anything like that. So I would love if anyone's listening, if you have any ideas of how do we expand our reach outside of the bike bubble, and getting this, because I think as I don't know, I'm seeing a lot of people due to the bike boom of COVID just interested in this new form of recreation,
Mhm.
and so how do we get in front of those people that maybe not aren't quite interested, but could be if we put this little like green dollar bill in front of them?
Right, right, exactly. I've seen some, really small county, city-based bike coalitions make up their own action alerts to their membership. I think that's a really valuable way for, if you're involved in those organizations to show support in a local space to really target a certain member of Congress. It's really valuable. But yeah, this is something that would benefit not just the folks already involved in your local bike coalition and not just the industry folks. I mean, this is a consumer credit. This is something that would go back in your individual pocket. And I didn't say this before, but I think it's important to mention is you don't have to report income to be eligible for this credit as written. When I say refundable, that just means that say you might be a delivery rider relying on an e-bike for work, and if you bought a new qualifying electric bicycle, um, even if your income's under the table or you're not whatever it is, you are still eligible for that credit on your electric bicycle. I think that's really important. And it's on us, on the bike industry, and for advocates of this bill to make sure that that information is shared to non-endemic bike groups and to advocates for mobility, for equity, and that's something we're working on.
That's great. And those are really important parts because I think to me, e-bikes are actually some of the most equitable forms of transportation, just affordability, access. As a mom, I can take my kids easily on a bike compared to a bus or a train or an Uber. Yeah, so I think, no, the only questions I have left for you would be what timeline are we talking about? And then if you can end us with that call to action of where should people go?
Yeah, the timeline is, it's hard to make predictions on when things will happen in DC, and that's not something I'm in the practice of doing. But I will say we are working to make this bill signed into law by the end of the 117th Congress. So by the end of 2022, this would be our goal to have this bill signed into law and then to be eligible for on your tax return. That means that we need to build support fast because it's a new idea, it's a new concept. It doesn't have, support from last year coming over into 2021. So that means we really need to build a coalition of supporters in Congress with the help of the listener here and with our partners, with anyone who cares about the accessibility and affordability of e-bikes. And I think that's really possible. There's so much enthusiasm in Washington D.C. right now for infrastructure, and even though this is a tax credit, it's not an infrastructure. It's an adoption bill necessarily. It has to, they have to go hand in hand. And for folks listening who might be concerned that we're putting all of our efforts into this and not infrastructure, rest assured that is not the case. Infrastructure is our bread and butter policy work, and we know that having a tax credit for an electric bicycle is only so valuable as the safe bicycle infrastructure that you have around you to actually use it. So it all goes hand in hand, and we need our representatives to know that too.
That's great. And where do they find this information? I'm going to link to it, but just in case
Yeah.
you're riding your bike and listening to this, where can they find it, Noah?
That would be on peopleforbikes.org. And if you go to our electric bicycle page or you Google People for Bikes, e-bikes, any of that will take you right to all of the information that you need to support this bill, to learn about our other e-bike advocacy work, and to get involved how you want to.
Great. Noah, thank you so much for jumping on this last minute Zoom session. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.